Welcome. My name is Ashley Franklin and I'm the Education Curator at Louisiana's Old State Capitol. Today I'd like to tell you a little bit about one of our temporary exhibitions that we'll have through April 14th called Changing Landscapes, Jan Beauboeuf along the Solomon Northup Trail. After 4 decades as an artist in Alabama, Texas, and New Mexico, Jan Beauboeuf returned to her home in Moncla, Louisiana, 6 miles north of Marksville. Although Jan spent much of her career creating neon sculptures, she turned to photography as a way to express herself after her return to Louisiana. She spent some time teaching in Alabama while there were discriminatory practices in place, which eventually caused her to move west. After she returned home to Louisiana and connected with the tale of Solomon Northup, she decided to create a photography exhibition that would focus on many of the things he might have seen during his time enslaved in Louisiana. Solomon Northup was from Minerva, New York. He was living with his wife and 3 children in Sarasota Springs before he was kidnapped. He was an accomplished fiddle player, and this was how he was lured from the safety of New York, his home state where slavery had been outlawed since 1827, to Washington, D.C., where slavery was still legal. Once Solomon reached Washington, D.C., he woke up in chains with his freeman papers and money stolen. He was put aboard a ship that was bound for New Orleans. Escape was never far from his mind, nor were thoughts of his wife and 3 children he had left behind in New York City. He originally had a plan to try to take over the ship that was bound for New Orleans, but that plan died along with one of the enslaved men aboard the ship. Solomon Northup arrived at the port of New Orleans, which today still serves as the 6th largest port in the United States. While en route to be sold in New Orleans, Solomon Northup managed to get the help of one man and get a letter up to New York City to inform his wife and friends of his capture and intent to be sold in New Orleans. What made matters particularly difficult was that the slave drivers gave him the assigned name of Platt, so there were no official records of Solomon Northup, and he was one of over 600,000 that had been sold into slavery by 1841. These images show Congo Square, which today has been repurposed largely as a place for celebrations of African American culture and heritage. While on board a ship bound for New Orleans, Solomon Northup was exposed to smallpox. He became very sick and almost died. He spent some time in Charity Hospital. Once recovered, he was sold to a cotton planter named William Ford and arrived here at the Red River Landing with 3 other enslaved individuals. Solomon Northup spent time enslaved not far from our artist Jan Beauboeuf's hometown. Like Solomon, Jan Beauboeuf faced feelings of isolation and longing to escape as well. It is possible that she and Solomon both found brief moments of relief enjoying the beautiful Louisiana sunrises and sunsets. While enslaved by Henry Ford, Solomon proved himself to be a skilled and innovative laborer, even creating a new transportation process for some of Ford's lumber. Ford treated his enslaved individuals better than some masters. However, when he found himself in debt to a nearby carpenter by the name of Thibault, Ford was forced to sell 60% of ownership of Solomon to Thibault. So for a time, Solomon had 2 masters. Thibault had it out for Solomon. He was likely very jealous of Solomon's confidence and efficiency. He was always looking for new reasons to harass Solomon. After one attempted effort to kill Solomon, Solomon escaped Thibault by running through the swamps. As you can imagine, the swamps back then were incredibly dangerous, not only filled with water deep enough to easily drown, but also diseases, alligators, venomous snakes. But Solomon found himself running through the swamp to the safety of his other master's plantation. Ford and Thibault decided that they would sell Solomon to a cotton farmer named Edwin Epps. It was on the Epps plantation that Solomon would spend the next decade of his life enslaved. Edwin Epps was a particularly sadistic slave owner, always looking for new ways to harass his slaves. He would often wake them up in the middle of the night and force them to dance for him. He would also wake them up very early and force them into the fields, whip them if they didn't meet their quota for that day, and force them to work well into the night, especially when the moon was high. One good thing that happened while Solomon was enslaved on the Epps plantation was he met a carpenter named Samuel Bass. Samuel Bass was from Canada, where slavery was outlawed, and he personally detested slavery, making it his personal mission to help Solomon in any way that he could. That help came in the form of writing letters to send Solomon's friends and family in New York, informing them of his condition and his whereabouts. Those letters were mailed from the Old Bennett store, which served as a local post office at the time. Solomon's liberation came the cold morning of January 3rd, 1853, when he was in the field picking cotton with the other enslaved individuals. It was then that he saw the familiar face of his family friend and also attorney, Henry Northup, who had come down from New York to see to Solomon's release. Solomon was 44 years old and had been enslaved for 12 years. 44 was an age that many slaves, especially in Louisiana, did not live to see due to the harsh conditions they were subjected to and the numerous illnesses. After Solomon's rescue from the Epps plantation, there was one more hurdle to overcome. A legal proceeding that occurred the next day, which officially restored Solomon's freedom. Afterwards, he and Henry Northup stopped at Barbin's Landing en route to New Orleans as part of their return journey to New York. Once in New York, Solomon was reunited with his wife, 3 children, and grandson who he had never before met, who was named after him in his absence. Within that same year, Solomon published an autobiographical memoir titled 12 Years a Slave. Many formerly enslaved individuals wrote about their experiences after the American Civil War, but this entire memoir took place before the Civil War. We'll have this exhibition here at the Old State Capitol through April 14th. We encourage you to come out and take a look if you're able. We also have various programming that was created to complement this exhibition. Thank you so much, and we hope to see you here.